Welcome to Beyond the Press Release, a production of Gore.com, in which we take the time to speak with small cap executives after they put out important news. With us today, happy to have him back for the first interview of 2023. Steve McCauley of Empower Clinics, trades in Canada, EPW, for friends of this, EPWCF. Today's news is big, but before we get into it, for those new to the story, because maybe you saw the headline, Empower is an integrated healthcare company that's serving patients through medical centers, a medical device company, and a high complexity medical diagnostics lab. More than just lip service. 2021 annual revenues were $4.37 million. This year, even though the fiscal year isn't done yet, Q1 about 1.1 million revenue, Q2 just over 1.5, Q3 just under 1.6. So the company is executing. And today's press release that we're going to talk about is Empower signs LOI, letter of intent, for partnership to launch U.S. clinical trial management services for the biotech and pharmaceutical industries. There's a lot to unpack. Steve, welcome back, my friend.
Well, thank you, George. I appreciate it. It's good to be on the show again, talking to our followers. And we're excited to kind of get into this, as you say, unpack it. And I feel like part of what we're here to do is help educate our followers and our good shareholders on this work that may look like a surprise today, but it's something that we've been working on for quite a long time.
Yeah, this looks big. There's a lot to unpack, like we said. So before we go into the details, because even I have to educate myself talking to you, how big is this? Because you said this is something you've been working on for a long time. So, how potentially big, what kind of impact could it have to the company in the long term?
Well, we think it's incredibly significant. It's, as I say, we've been working on it for a long time. We started talking to Dr. Mocerla, a year ago, and we got set back with a couple of the challenges that we had to go through with audit through the middle of last year, and it put some of these things on the back burner. But after we got through it, got reestablished, of course, we picked up the conversations again, and the conversations got very, very active late in the fourth quarter. We were working through the plan, through the terms. We had a really good idea together with Dr. Mocerla where this could possibly go. And then we worked through, very important term sheets. And this wasn't it wasn't a term sheet that we considered to be kind of light or fluffy. This is really working out exactly the structure that will feed into the actual joint venture and the definitive agreements that go there. I wouldn't expect that we'll see hardly any changes, if at all, in what the final outcome looks like as we get through, the first quarter with these agreements. That's how serious Dr. Mocerla was, and we were, as we worked through these terms. We both want this to work. We've got a great game plan in front of us.
Okay, so let's go through that. The most important term is U.S. clinical trial management services. Now, all of us, when we hear clinical trial, we hear about clinical trials. They're massive for 5 years. They're very expensive. You're not running clinical trials, so I want to make sure we make this very important distinction. What is a clinical trial management service?
So I think generally there's an understanding that big pharma, want to bring novel new drugs and medicines to market to either arrest disease states or cure diseases in the future. And in order to get those products to market, they have to go through a very rigorous clinical trial process that ultimately has to get approved by the regulatory body. So in the United States, that's the FDA. And it's the biggest market for drugs and medicines in the world. So those programs and that product development are initiated and funded by the pharmaceutical company. But the pharmaceutical industry are no longer really running clinical trials. That's actually outsourced to what are called CROs, so contract research organizations. Sometimes people call them clinical research organizations, but by definition, it's contract research organization. Those big organizations coordinate and run the clinical trials through all the various stages. The early stages through the middle stages where you're getting more patients, you're defining more efficacy, you're running the trials for longer periods of time, right to the final submissions, and hopefully for the pharmaceutical companies, they get their approval. If they get their approval, the quantum leap in value is in the terms of tens and in some cases hundreds of billions of dollars. So there's a great deal at stake. Clinical research organizations, many of the big ones out there worldwide, have huge market caps. A number of them are public, both domestically in North America and also in Europe and Asia, some of which have market caps in excess of 40 and $50 billion. Even some of the smaller ones have market caps that are $3 or $4 billion. And we've been doing, extensive market research on that. So there's a big market to serve. And we have, together with Dr. Mocerla, so many of the ingredients to be very successful. And by the way, Dr. Mocerla is already running clinical trials. He does that in his Las Vegas medical research business, he's been involved in clinical trials for the neighborhood of nearly 15 years.
Okay, so that answers questions. You'll say, okay, who is Dr. Mocerla? How does he fit? So let's segue right to that. Who is Dr. Mocerla? Okay, so he's definitely already doing this. And what is the synergy here? Okay, this is a JV, so everyone brings some to the table.
Yeah.
Why does Dr. Mocerla need Empower? Why does Empower need Dr. Mocerla?
Yeah, so this is a relationship that was a very warm referral going back about a year ago, and we've been nurturing that relationship for quite some time. The concept of relationship building doesn't necessarily happen overnight, particularly when there's a big project and a lot at stake. I think Dr. Mocerla believes in the value of a public company and what that medium can be for the future, just in terms of ultimately shareholder value and valuation. And he also views us as a catalyst to move to other locations and other states and other sites. When you're a primary investigator like him as a medical doctor, and you've got a clinic or a location in a certain city, and you're seeing patients as part of your research trial, it's hard to get out of that in terms of expansion. But he's got the project that he's running, his Alzheimer's studies in Las Vegas are really well structured and running. They're neat and they're tidy, and he's got a good support network now. So this is about expansion for him. What we have on the other side is great expertise with medical clinics and medical doctors. We understand the patient experience. When you take our Dallas operations, we have a tremendous facility. We have scientists and clinicians, and we're right in the heart of the medical community of Dallas-Fort Worth, which is 8 million people. So we've got these ingredients that each bring to the table. The other thing with Dr. Mocerla is he understands the ecosystem of clinical trials. He has the contractual relationships with big pharma and knows how to speak to them. And through our due diligence, I've had the opportunity to see these contracts. I've had the opportunity to see the payments and the revenue cycle, and just kind of watch it take place. And it's very impressive. It's high quality service income. It doesn't require medical billing. It's coming from the top of the food chain, frankly, in the healthcare ecosystem, with massive budgets because they've got so much opportunity at stake.
So if I had to summarize it, then it would be accurate to say that Dr. Mocerla has a great business that needs to expand. That's where Empower comes in, and you've got the medical lab, you've got a lot of the expertise to help expand, but you don't have the relationships with big pharma. So that's what you both bring to the table. So there's real synergy here, and that's why when I look at the terms of the deal, it makes it very clear to me that this isn't a JV between George and Steve. Hey, let's see if we can throw something on the wall here and see what sticks.
Mm-hmm.
You're each contributing $200,000 in seed capital to the joint venture. That's real money.
Yeah,
that's real money, especially in an environment where, like you said, money isn't easiest to come by. That's real. He's also getting 2 million shares of Empower as well. And what I also found very interesting was, if the JV gets to $5 million in revenue, he gets an additional 750,000 stock options. And normally people don't put terms like that in there unless they think they can get there. So let's talk about how serious of a JV this is and what the next steps are going to be. But let's talk about those terms.
Yeah, the terms, like we kind of where we started at the top here. I mean, we worked on this like it was the definitive agreement. That's how serious it was, because both ourselves and Dr. Mercherla, you sort of took the position is that we're doing this. So we're going to hammer the key terms out right now. Otherwise, there's no reason. Let's just get it worked out, because if we can't come to agreement or consensus on key terms now, why start? And so the sort of attitude from both parties was one of, we're going to figure this out because it's just too darn important. It's very important for Dr. Mercherla and his reputation and his desire. He's a medical doctor involved in nuclear medicine by education, but he's also very entrepreneurial and has a tremendous amount of energy. Yeah, tremendous amount of energy and excitement, and has passion for this sector of healthcare. And we equally have a great passion for what we're doing, and we have a passion for change and evolvement, and we're willing and able to adjust our path. But as we look back on the last couple of years, some of the assets that came into play, such as the opening of medical clinics or the Medi Collective, the acquisition of the medical diagnostics laboratory, all feed into us having the strength and the expertise and kind of the playbook to do this. The catalyst of having Dr. Mercherla involved has really brought focus to where we're going in the future. And I've said many times over the last sort of 12 to 18 months that US healthcare is going to play an important role for us. We never wanted to lose sight of that. And I think we've found our footing. I think we've found an area of strength, and it is a massive sector and a massive segment. And the team have a game plan right now. There's some low-hanging fruit that they've already identified that they are going to go and get their hands on right away in Texas. They like other markets that are a little bit smaller, like Denver and Salt Lake City, and down the freeway to Austin and San Antonio, where getting a site up and operating, or even taking over somebody else's existing research project where perhaps they just want to be medical doctors and don't really put much effort onto the clinical trial side. So not only are there existing trials that we can get it into our into our portfolio, but Dr. Mercherla really feels strong about areas such as neurology and Alzheimer's trials. He also feels that we're ideally poised to focus on diabetes opportunities, because that's a real burgeoning area of trial work. And given the fact that we've got our Medisure business as an asset that has 10 years of experience in medical diabetes, we're of the belief that that's going to be considered an asset or an attribute as we talk to big pharma and we talk to the large CROs out there that also are sources of contracts for us.
So let's talk about how this evolves in 2023. Assume we get the definitive agreement, and doesn't look like there's any reason to believe you wouldn't. Let's talk to shareholders about, because you say step one is to create a Dallas-based SMO. Yeah. Expand to other cities. And then step two is evolve into a CRO. And so again, a lot of shareholders, even I, are not familiar with these, but more than just by definition, let's talk about how you see it evolving into a business now, unfolding and evolving into a business, and what that plan looks like for the next 12 months. Yeah, I mean, the steps are laid out for us. We're laser focused on what needs to be done. Yes, the announcement of the joint venture and the detail behind it and how well thought out it really is kind of should be an indicator or a precursor of how much legwork we've already done, right? Right. And the JV will get formed. It's going to be funded. It's very CapEx light, which is another strength. We've already got the facility. So it's not like we have to go and sign a lease or do other things. We have labor and clinical staff and scientists already there. We have really strong ties to the Dallas-Fort Worth medical community. And so we've got network in a way, as an example, that Dr. Mercherla does not have.
He's not connected to Dallas-Fort Worth, but he is now, and because we've made those connections and we're already making those introductions. And so we're just going to let those guys go and do what they do best. So the way we think it develops is we get our first agreements, whether it's a new agreement or we're taking over an existing agreement. You start the treatment of patients or the clinical trial work on patients who qualify right away. And
so you think you can get to revenue pretty quick? This is you
we're
think
going to get to revenue very quick because
wow.
I've looked at these contracts, and the contracts have very prescribed payout schedules based on the work that you do with patients as part of the trial. The payments are typically every 30 days, and it's really solid, continuous, recurring cash flow.
Because it's coming from big pharma.
It's coming from big pharma. And this is really important. This is really important to understand. You know, when we look at some of the challenges that we've had in Ontario with ministry payouts and medical doctors, where you've got one payer per province, you know, we're going into the US market where there are multiple payers. But even in this particular case, we're not dependent on medical billing for the cash flow. It's coming from exceptionally well-funded big pharma who has such a vested stake in securing this data from the patient experience for their trial. Dr. Mochella explained that these big pharma companies, they get bent out of shape if there's any form of delay. The concept of like a 30-day delay, with a patient for them is very challenging. So they're pushing very hard because they need large quantities of data. They need diverse data from diverse patients in diverse markets with diverse backgrounds, because that ultimately makes their study more efficient, provides better efficacy, and gives them a better opportunity to gain their approval. And if they gain that approval for that new drug, you know what happens.
So they're using money as a catalyst to let's keep
Absolutely.
it going, guys. Keep it going fast, grow
Yes.
and keep going fast. So
yeah, and they don't put
we don't have to worry about where the money's coming from and how secure it is and how big it's going to be.
That's correct. That's correct. And they need more and more data. So they don't put caps on the number of patients in the studies, particularly in some of the middle stages. If you think of stage 3, stage 3B, stage 4 of a trial, these trials expand, and they're not 2-week or 4-week. You're dealing in some of the ones that I've seen with Dr. Mochella, these are 110, 120 week trials with touch points every single week with the patient.
I know that no two clinical trials look the same, but nonetheless, I have to ask, as I can almost feel the investors saying, all right, so what do these contracts typically look like? What can they look like? Give me an indication. So to the best of your ability, and I understand that if Pfizer's running a clinical trial on this product, it might be on this potential product they're trying to develop, it might be massive. And George Calm Farm over here is running a trial, smaller product. But generally speaking, can you give the shareholders an indication of, what each trial might mean has meant for Mochella all this time?
Well, I mean,
what it could mean.
Yeah. So there's a baseline of what it has meant and what it could mean. These clinical trials are oftentimes they spend billions of dollars to bring a new drug to market, and a great deal of that spend is going to go into the clinical research organizations and that ecosystem of which we are a participant. If we start as a site management organization and we have multiple sites, we're already starting to become a significant player. And the growth opportunity that we receive, I mean, you've got trials that you're going to see patients, the value of the patient to an SMO or participant in a CRO are going to be in the 6 figures over the time period of that trial experience. So when we look at our metrics going forward, even the concept of having 10 patients actively participating in a trial is not insignificant. And then if you have 20, and then what if you have 30, and what if you have 100? You've got a business model that is far.
You're talking about 6 figures per patient.
Correct, over the life of that trial. And so when we think about what we might look like in 2023, 24, 25, we look significantly different from a revenue standpoint than what we look like today. And I think something that should be noted in the proposed structure of our JV, and hopefully it stood out, and that is that, Empower as the public company will own 51% and Dr. Mucerla will own 49%. That was a very gracious, agreement by Dr. Mucerla, and he understood it perfectly. And as I was able to explain just how accounting works for public companies, we need to know that if we have that majority stake in terms of ownership, then we get to capture the top line revenue. We will ultimately share the proceeds at a pre-tax net income level, but we're talking about a service here that generates extremely high gross profit margins. And as long as we're managing our costs effectively, and we know that it's a lighter CapEx structure to start, particularly in our case, because of what we already have as infrastructure. So you're not signing up to new long-term leases. We're not hiring a bunch of new people. We've already got it. So the baseline's already there. We just got to go grab a couple contracts and get on with the business of being a site management organization. And if we do it right, we scale. We get some luck on our side. We get momentum. We have the potential to become a CRO of our own at some point in the future. It's not going to be in 2023, but it could be down the road.
You said, so devil's advocate, you said we got to go grab a couple of contracts. We got to get a couple of contracts. How difficult is that? Sounds like Dr. Mucerla has been doing this for years. So is this just a case of he's got a pipeline already, and now he's got an expanded company enabled to be able to execute these? Or is it feast or famine where this 2022 he might have had 2 or 3 contracts with big pharma, and 2023 might be 0? How difficult is it to land these?
So
I want to give investors a perspective.
Well, I'd say that as an outsider, as a non-incumbent, I would say, yeah, it's difficult, like anything. And but that's what Dr. Mucerla brings to the table, and why we value him so much, and why we're willing to provide incentives and compensation around it. He has relationships with a multitude of big pharma companies and other CROs. But the challenge for him is expansion, right? Getting out of the market that he's in. So it takes a different type of resource, different types of organizational development that we bring to the table. And the fact that we've got a strong footprint in one of the biggest healthcare markets in the country, is not insignificant. And we have the currency of the public company and the catalyst that we can bring. And, he's as equally motivated to be part of what we're doing as we all are as existing shareholders. He wants to be a big shareholder, and he knows and understands with his entrepreneurial spirit that he has the ability with us to actually influence the future direction, the future revenues, the future free cash flow, and all of those will contribute to greater valuation in the future. And we all want that, right? None of us are happy right now with the markets and what our market looks like. But, we're not sitting idly by just accepting it. We're working hard behind the scenes in spite of challenges that have come our way.
Well, look, 2022 was a challenging year valuation for a lot of growth companies with the names of Tesla, Facebook, Meta. Amazon, Netflix, Shopify. I mean, we saw valuations get compressed between 50 for the likes of Google and Amazon to 75% for the likes of Netflix and Shopify and Tesla. I mean, look, Elon Musk was all over the news of having lost the greatest fortune in history in 2022. But the most important thing is, yeah, none of us like that, obviously, if you're long. But the most important thing is, as long as you have a strong underlying business and you're building a strong and underlying business, then you survive and thrive, as opposed to George Calm widgets that didn't really have a business. Now you can't get financing and it lights out.
Yeah. And that's what we're doing here. Like, we have got to continue to evolve. Some of the status quo has not been working. We have had this in our hip pockets behind the scenes. A reminder to everybody, that we're always working on this. We live and breathe this. We've got really dedicated and passionate team members who are prepared to adjust, change, do whatever is necessary, do different jobs, do somebody else's job, just chip in right now to keep it all going. And, with an eye that, look, we are prepared to, look different in the future if that's right for our success in the future. We're prepared to move, and I feel we're moving to be more and more of a biotech life sciences organization, bumping right up against the top of the food chain, which is big pharma in healthcare. And what a great place to be shoulder to shoulder with, right? And again, having done due diligence, having viewed these contracts, looking at the payouts, looking at the opportunity. And then I think about some of the capabilities that we already have in our possession, the ability to manage patients, run the patient experience. We have technology and telemedicine and medical devices and scientists and laboratory. These are kind of all the key ingredients to be a successful, clinical trial organization. And I think we have credibility.
Is this the transformational event, the transformational agreement that brings all of, the lab, the Medisure products, the medical, brings it all together and makes it just one, and creates one massive organization now, because they've all been working as independent pieces and on their own, which is great. But is this the one that kind of gels them all together and brings and creates that transformational company?
Yeah, and when don't dismiss the work we've been doing with Atlas Medical, the international medical device manufacturer. The services that we're talking about with Atlas Medical, where you're running clinical studies on medical devices to seek FDA 510(k) approvals, is not inconsistent with running clinical trials on behalf of big pharma for them to bring new novel drugs to market. And so in both cases, we're leveraging our facility assets and our know-how and skill. And keep in mind, people may not know this, that the Medisure laboratory team have actually already done clinical studies on behalf of other pharmaceutical companies as part of COVID. We actually helped a pharmaceutical company out of Florida bring 2 of their COVID tests to FDA approval, and those products were in market. So the team actually has actual real world experience. I've got all the documentation in our SharePoint folders and in our storage. We've actually done it before. It's when it may appear like a new venture per se, but actually the running the processes of clinical study and or clinical trial is something that is already in the DNA of this organization. So I'm just looking at that and saying, this is what we should be doing. This is the type of organization that, just might be it, George. It just might be the coming together of, what we want for our vision, the vision kind of we've always had. And I think we're defining ourselves much more clearly, and giving ourselves a really significant opportunity for scale and for really generating something of value. And the fact if you can be part of bringing the elimination of diseases in the future and be part of that ecosystem, to me is just, it gives me goosebumps thinking about, the type of contributions our organization may be making to the future of health and of mankind, because that's what's happening here.
Well, if there's one thing about you, Steve, when, I've had questions over the last few months for all companies, not just yours, where my friends and people say, hey, George, how's Empower? How do you think Empower is going to do and all that? And I'd say, look, one thing I can tell you about Steve is he doesn't know how to play small ball. Your DNA and your background, where you've come from, and Six Sigma under Jack Welch at GE, you don't know how to play small ball. You'll play small ball when you had to, take Empower and do what you've had to do. But
yeah,
this is not a surprise to me, even though it's awesome to see it and none of us saw it coming. This isn't a surprise to me either. And I think this, and hopefully, I think I speak on behalf of all shareholders, we'll hope that this is, the Dr. Macerla JV hopefully is the supercharger, the catalyst now that brings all the pieces together and just, feeds them and allows them together to work to create this massive revenue stream. And can't wait to have you back, my friend. I know you and I can talk about this for another hour, but can't wait to have you back as this develops. But from the sounds of it, I have a note here. You're expecting to get the revenues pretty quick. So hopefully it won't be long before you come back on. And maybe even with Dr. Macerla, I think we'd all like to meet him.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, he's definitely
a
very articulate, well-educated, and energetic, individual. So, I welcome the opportunity to, to have some more time on camera with him. And bottom line is that, we're here working hard every day. And again, we're dedicated to what we're doing, and we want to see it through. And, we just care so much about what we're doing and where we're going, and we're prepared to adjust and pivot and be agents of change to make sure that we get the formula right. So, and the other thing that's interesting too going forward is that, we'll be able to have, quite a lot of regular updates about progress, because, milestones become very identifiable in all of this. Again, even as something as simple as adding 5 patients, to a clinical trial, again, is not insignificant, right?
Yeah.
Given the way that, the patients are valued and what it means to these big CROs, and ultimately what it means to big pharma who are backing all these contracts.
Well, Steve, thanks for joining us today and explaining all this, because there was a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
A lot of us aren't familiar with a lot of these terms. We know big pharma, we know clinical trials, but we don't know these nuances. And it's pretty exciting. Look, I'm a shareholder. Everyone watching is a shareholder in some perspective.
Well, just go do some research. Just go and do a Google search on, CRO or contract research organizations, or just do a simple search on, what is a clinical trial, and it will unpack so much content, so much information. There's so many YouTube videos that are out there. And I think education right now is very important for our followers, because if you understand it, then you can share it. You can say, yeah, I think I'm getting this. And you can also go look at comp sets. They're out there. There's many good quality, massive public companies, both on NASDAQ and New York Exchange, and then internationally, there's some behemoths out there as well. And these are CROs. I'm not talking about the pharmaceutical companies. I'm talking about the CRO organizations. They themselves have billions and billions of market cap, and are generating huge top line, generating really significant, free cash flow, or what we call EBITDA. And so if you're trying to be in a segment of healthcare that's demonstrating value, that's kind of been immune to some of the economic issues over the last, 12 months, this is the sector.
One modification to that, Steve, it's no longer just go do a Google search. It's, hey, go ask ChatGPT.
Go ask ChatGPT. I actually did that.
Give you a much faster answer.
I actually did it. I'll send you a screen capture offline, but I actually did that exact thing 2 nights ago.
Oh, that's funny. Hey, thanks for joining us, buddy. This is great. And I can't wait to have you back on, my friend.
Hey, thanks for your time, George. Much appreciated.
To everybody at home, you've been watching or you've been listening by podcast on Spotify, Google, Apple, your favorite podcast platform, to Steve McCauley. CEO at Empower Clinics, trades in Canada, EPW, trades in the US, EPWCF. For those who are new to the story, because you saw this headline and you want to find out more about the company, start your due diligence on the Agoracom on the company's profile page. And once you've got that, make sure you go over to the Empower Clinics website and do your deep dive due diligence. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day. See you next time.
Hey guys, this video is over, but don't forget to help your company by liking it and even leaving a comment below. And then don't forget to help yourself by subscribing to our channel and never missing another great Agoracom small cap video.